Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Utano Creek and not Gaza Creek? Yeah. I mean, I know where Cloverdale is. All right, I think we're almost ready. What if I've already.
Cool. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, really happy to be here. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally. Totally. Yes. Yeah, so basically I was on a meditation retreat. This is good start to the story already. Uh, so and I think it's worth saying just a little bit about how I wound up there. I won't like, give the whole like yarn or anything, but just the brief version is basically I had been in the startup world for a little while, worked at Google and a few other places, and then found myself gradually to this, basically pragmatic Dharma thing that you may have heard of. So these people write books talking about how like enlightenment is a real thing that you can get. You just have to go on this thing called a meditation retreat for a year or two, and then you get it, and you get to be enlightened from now on. And I was like, that sounds great. I want that. And so with that in the back of my head, this little meditation community in Vermont sent me an email. Sent an email out to a list I was on saying, "Hey, we want someone to come out and program some web apps for us while also doing a meditation retreat." Um, it was like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just like were you? And so you was it that specific ask that got, like seemed like you were like, oh wait, now I can combine these
That was the
things.
one. That was the one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was still a programmer. I was sitting in my
yeah,
free time, like in the morning, the evening, and stuff. But like, it wasn't like it was definitely there was no thought of it ever being a vocation. That would be crazy.
yeah,
Uh, it was just purely an interest in the back of my head. And then like, I see an email saying we're getting this thing started, and we need 3 people to help get it started. 2 of them have Japanese names, and every Zen monastery for the last 1,000 years has had one of them. And it was
yeah,
like, we need a so and so person. This is the name in Japanese. We need so and
yeah.
so person. This is the name in Japanese. We need a Rails web programmer. And I'm like, hmm.
Is that like that? That's like the contemporary monastery. Is like, yeah,
So I'm like, okay, I'll bite.
yeah, perfect.
And yeah, one thing led to another, and I was in Vermont, sitting in a Quaker meeting house, cold, and sometimes writing code. Um,
And were you helping them do just basic kind of like building website, connecting with the outside world kind of thing, or did they have other like technical work to do?
Yeah, so they, even at that stage, they were actually really interested in tech. So they had me working on a web app for a mindfulness in schools program that they were doing.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so it's like they're in schools, they're teaching mindfulness, they're getting people to do a rhythm of practice, like 5, 10 minutes a day, which is a lot to ask if you're talking about a
Yeah,
third grade classroom.
yeah.
Um, and just kind of like getting teachers up to speed on the basics so they can like lead mindfulness sessions. Uh,
So this is actually a totally different group of people than who you're now connected with in Vermont. At first, I was thinking it's the same.
The same group, same group.
Oh, it is the
They
same group.
started off that
Okay.
way. They
Oh,
started
okay,
off
okay.
that way, and then over years, gradually became more of a monastery.
Got it. Okay, okay.
Um,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Mindfulness is sort of the, yeah, it's like eventually you're like, hold my beer. Like, I've got something else
exactly,
to
exactly,
do.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They're like
That
they
makes
well, like
sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You start off doing a mindfulness in schools program, and you just kind of keep on finding yourself getting pushed in a certain direction by forces, nature, and such. And
Yeah,
so Uh, but yeah, they were doing other stuff too. So like I was working on an Android app for them that was kind of like a monastic level meditation trainer.
right.
So like you take this app and use very subtle gestures, like rocking the phone with your body to indicate whether you're like experiencing one thing or another.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, lot of fun. Some of the most fun I've had coding, aside from Urban.
I think I didn't realize that that you had been involved in the same community that becomes monastic academy
Yeah,
beforehand. I knew that there was a Zen, like there was, yeah, the thread of like practice, but I didn't realize it
yeah,
was the same group. That's cool.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
so did any of the apps actually like go out into the world? Did you release stuff too?
So the mindfulness in schools program did. We had probably about 10,000 people using it at its height.
Oh, cool.
So none of it like went viral or anything or like went to the moon or whatever. But that wasn't really the intention anyway.
Yeah, that's still
Um,
good.
yeah, and then a couple things got onto the app store, but nothing really big.
Yep.
Uh, monastic level meditation trainer is always going to be a niche product at best.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, did you feel like, so was it the result of that? I mean, I'm joking about, yeah, I do feel like people often kind of like, you start with mindfulness and then you're like, wait, I actually have to keep going. Like, I mean, even if you're coming at it from the standpoint of someone who has a serious practice, like, I
Yeah.
feel like people will often kind of go there and come back or something like that. But did you
Mhm.
guys feel like was there some specific learning from that whole project? Like, in terms of like, oh, actually, like, or did that project lead to becoming sort of more seriously a monastery, basically, or are those things
Mhm.
not necessarily connected?
Yeah. So it was through doing that project that basically. So this is like secondhand. I wasn't around for a lot of the decisions that were made around this. When I was there, it was still much more this like teacher training program for the school's program. But the basic thing kept on being like, uh, how can we have people who are trained enough to actually know like where meditation practice goes and how to navigate that territory,
Yeah.
and have those people running stuff that gets made.
Yeah.
So like we were very much on the side of like let's just hire business people to do the business stuff and we'll have the monks do the monk stuff.
Yeah.
And like basically just through trying to do that a bunch of times
Yeah.
and seeing all the problems with that, we were like, okay, nope. So
Yeah.
eventually we got to the point of just like, okay, the monks have to learn the business stuff. The business people have to learn the monk stuff. Sorry.
Is that, I mean, is that, but historically that's, I don't actually know, but my guess, knowing the amount that I do, is that that's more normal historically. It's that everyone's has to be, you have to be a monk
Yes.
to work in a monastery, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal. Although what actually though, like what it means to be a monk in those cases is often like kind of different. Like if you're going to be a worker, you'll be sitting for like 20 minutes a day or something like that, or
Yeah.
um, this thing of like trying to integrate that in one person is, I think, I'm probably wrong. I'm sure there are historical examples of this happening earlier.
Yeah.
Um, None spring to the front of my mind, and I wildly speculate that that may be due to the individualistic nature of this culture.
Yeah.
Um, that we like so much emphasize this like person who does everything.
Yeah.
Um, and
Wait, you
so,
mean that, oh, wait, I was asking about it being
yeah,
like in the ancient case, you're
yeah,
saying
yeah.
that you had workers and so on who are kind of released from their more serious obligation, or they're kind of, they're like
That's
amateur
my sense.
monks.
Or people are like
Yeah.
cooking or stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you guys
But
have a
like,
different take. You're like, no, everybody should conduct it, like, or have the same level of commitment or whatever. Yeah. That's
well, yeah,
interesting.
more not so much same level of commitment, more like everyone should be doing both training in terms of meditation and in terms of like leadership,
Yeah.
in terms of like practically running things.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So not
Yeah.
necessarily like leadership, operations, whatever, just like making the
Yeah.
thing work somehow. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, that makes sense. But wait, anyway,
Yeah.
so you work on a series of technical projects for these guys, and then, but
Yeah.
this is pre-Urbit still, right?
Pre-Urbit still. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. So I'm at the monastery.
Yeah.
It's the break period. We're allowed to do whatever we want. And so I'm
Yeah.
on Reddit.
Yeah.
Um,
Classic. Like any monk.
like any monk.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, it's so funny. And I'm browsing Reddit and I get to this weird thing called Urbit.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's Urbit? And, you know, I open it up and I'm like, wow, this is Candyland.
Yeah.
Because this was like, I mean, Urbit has gone through many stages of like clear documentation and polishing up the rough edges of the language and like making it approachable to people.
Yeah.
Like an amount of work has been done on that that I think is hard to appreciate or understand. Like just the level of dedication to bringing this thing to like the level of programmers and like lay people can understand and like get up to speed on it.
Yeah.
Um, this was before all of that.
Yeah.
So it's just like, here's
Yeah.
some code, man. It's in a GitHub repo.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
There's
I
like
mean, that
one
was,
line of comment per. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wonder when, wait, so do you remember when that was? Because I discovered Urbit basically on Hacker News,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny fact of, I feel like everyone involved in Urbit basically just discovered it on the internet. And it was in the state that you described, which was, it was like, it was just the source code. And actually what was
Yes.
amazing about it was that it was basically just, well, because the system is all run from source, if you figured out, which isn't that hard to figure out, how to follow a
Exactly.
thread through the source, you're just like, oh,
Exactly.
it's actually the whole thing. Like the whole
Exactly.
system is here. Yeah, which is amazing and
Yes.
extremely
Yes.
unusual and
Yes.
definitely specific for, you have to be, you have to have a certain level of like you have to have gone through a certain amount of technical frustration, like trying to debug something to immediately understand like how valuable that is. Yeah. Uh,
Exactly. Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
documentation was bad.
And it was
Oh, just
true
the
because
documentation was so bad at that time. Like it was unreadably bad.
it was not. Yeah. It was those. Yeah. Exactly. It was like little poems off to the side of the code. It's like
Yeah.
literally what we're talking.
Yeah.
But it's true though because I'd spent so long like writing Rails code and C++ and stuff, and it's just like
Yeah.
trying to debug a problem. It's like, what does this line do? You
Yeah.
know, I get to a line, and it's like this is either an assembly opcode
Yeah.
or an RPC to a
Yeah.
remote server that's
Yeah.
running Paxos or something, and I have no way
Yeah.
of finding out which one.
yeah, you have no idea like where the boundaries are. I mean, for me, it was
Yeah,
like coming at it originally, just growing up as uh, I mean, throughout most of my like learning to program as someone who is not natively an engineer or even didn't have like friends around me who are super technical. Like if you've ever like, or for me, it was like I was coming at it from this standpoint of like, just let me just tinker with this and figure out what it is. And the thing is like with, yeah, Python, PHP, whatever
yeah,
scripting languages, especially, this was even worse for me in like Java world. I'm just like, where are
yeah,
the boundaries? Like, I don't know like how much of this I'm supposed to know. Like, and then like, yeah, when something goes wrong, like how do I dive more deeply into it to try and understand what's going on here? And then yeah, all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually this depends on like some other framework that's like
yeah,
written in some other language. And I'm just
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah,
come on, man. Like it's so
yeah,
frustrating. I'm
yeah,
surprised
exactly.
that more people aren't frustrated by this actually. It's like
Yeah,
everyone just
right.
completely accepts it, but I don't know. It seems
Yeah, it's
totally
so
insane to me.
weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. Software engineering is very, very weird. Uh,
Super weird.
uh,
Sense.
But wait, so then you're at the retreat, you find Urbit and we have somewhat similar but disjoint experiences. Although if you're seeing it on Red, I mean, it's like probably not that different. You just showed up more quickly than I did, I
Yeah,
suppose.
more or less.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I basically like, I had like well, after that, I discover Urbit. Then it's just a question of how much time do I have to monkey around with the system. So
yeah,
it's like I have free period, I have evening period.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so I just spend all of that time going like, what is this?
yeah.
Um,
Did you? It was running, right? Like you're able to boot
yeah,
and get on
yeah,
the network.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, that was the other thing that's amazing. Right? You're like, holy shit, the whole source is all here, and then you
Yeah,
actually, I mean, at that time it was still really easy to boot. I mean, you just run a
yeah,
couple commands and you can boot it, and it works. Um,
exactly. And then you can see everything that's happening at every layer, and it just
yeah,
like it's so interesting how it like to me at that time especially, still to this day, but at that time especially, I was really addicted to this like aha moment of like I'm looking at this thing and I don't understand it. And there are all these different pieces, and then oh, that's that part, that's that part, that's that part. This is the machine, how it works.
yeah,
And Urbit was just like that.
yeah,
It was like a super fast way of getting a bunch of that.
yeah,
Just like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're like
oh,
it's like a feeling of your feet on the ground kind of thing. I think like that's like
yeah,
if you've yeah
right.
you don't get that very much with computers these days. I think.
Yeah,
But so did you complete the retreat? The retreat was ending anyway, or something like. I think I'm just curious how like did you get on a plane and fly to San
yeah,
Francisco?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
how did
yeah.
that actually work out?
Yeah, I did finish the retreat. I uh, there's a whole story of the retreat, as you can imagine. Like you spend 9 months in a
Yeah,
monastery. You're gonna see some stuff.
yeah, I'm sure.
within.
Yeah, 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 I was gonna say,
Spend
or not see, and that's the yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Spend 10 years running a monastery, you're gonna see some stuff outside. Spend 9 months on a meditation retreat, you're gonna see some stuff inside.
yeah, 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 makes sense.
I saw some stuff inside.
Yeah,
And then, basically left at around the end of the retreat. And right after the scheduled end of the retreat, I got on a plane and like went back to SF to join Orbit.
got it. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, because then when we met, you must have been. I think that it's funny because the way the timing works out. I think when I found Urbit and I was about to go away, and I went
Hmm.
away for like 3 weeks,
Hmm.
basically just went surfing, uh, and I spent that time while I was it was like like a long planned and hard earned vacation
Cool,
at the
cool.
time. And I spent a bunch of that time, yeah, playing with Urbit and reading and kind of like trying to understand what this thing was while I was gone. And I
Oh,
think I was at that time, I
cool.
was basically just I was like, I was looking for the next thing to work on. And I,
Right.
yeah, pretty much kind of I was like, it was sort of similar in that I was like, I think this is it. Like, this is kind of the only thing that needs to be worked on.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, so you were I mean, we worked together. I mean, it was a while. You were there before me, and it was a while before I actually formally joined. I couldn't.
That's
That
right. That's
transition
right.
took some time. It was
That's right.
probably 6 months or something before I actually joined.
Yeah, something like
Uh,
that. Yeah. So yeah, we were like sharing rice in the rice cooker at that office before you, I think, formally
oh
joined the
yeah, because
company.
they finally got a real office. Yeah, which
Yeah,
is an
right.
extremely
Moved out of
weird
that little
place.
box.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like that was like
Yeah.
a pre WeWork basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It was,
uh, but
yeah.
then you also
Arguably a two-person office with four people in it.
yeah, that was an awful space.
So bad. It was
I
so bad.
I mean honestly all the this office is pretty nice, but
It's
like
pretty nice. Yeah.
most of the early urban offices were really terrible. Could do a long conversation about that too. So yeah, you were around for a while working primarily on I remember you working on like Raft stuff basically. So working on basically making the interpreter friendly to a hosted environment, which obviously took many years for us to circle back on.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I left, and so for so many years I could just still I still see Raft colon on the boot line. I'm like, yep,
Whoa,
that's
was
me.
that still there?
Yeah, well,
Like,
yeah, because the code. I mean, like that code was touching like the core of the run loop. So like, yeah,
yeah,
it's gonna, you could edit the comment out, but the fact remains that like you're
yeah,
booting through this like kind of half
yeah,
done
yeah,
Raft protocol.
yeah. That makes sense.
And it's been,
That's fair.
it's obviously I was working in a branch and stuff got merged in appropriate ways, so it's fine. No one cares.
Yeah,
It's not like a big
yeah, yeah,
problem, but like
yeah, yeah.
still,
Well,
sort of
that's a
nice.
nice like artifact.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly.
well, I guess we can like it might make more sense rather than like going through because I'm like you were there you took off for a good reason because at the time the company was kind it was like young and chaotic and that was like before I'm
Yep.
sort of like I take no responsibility for anything about Tlon
Yep.
before I took over
Yep. Yep. Yep.
which was yeah it was like a while it was probably 2 years almost before I actually like took over but
Yeah. Yeah.
then yeah took off I think for completely understandable reasons and but then eventually obviously yeah ended up back in the monastic world so I'm kind of curious like and we've stayed in touch this throughout this pretty much this whole time. I feel like there's been a
Yeah.
period where we didn't really stay connected, but and it's always been my sense that yeah, like sort of Urbit and the monastic work are kind of resonant or
Mhm.
somehow like at least loosely connected.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so that was I'm guess I'm kind of curious to hear about well when you went back to work on monastic academy or Oak or I
Mhm.
don't I'm never sure if I'm using the right name
Yeah,
here.
Monastic Academy is fine. That's the big brand. That's, it's
Sure, yeah.
it's good to go with
We
that
could
one.
put it in the comment, or in
Yeah.
the video description, or
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still an amateur streaming personality. uh,
Hey, me too.
yeah, probably true. Um, I guess I'm curious what the like when you decided to go like when you decided to go back and do this sort of seriously, it was a much more I feel like substantial decision. Like you felt like you were really like committing yourself to doing this. I'm
Yeah.
curious, um, maybe just like what that felt like or why you felt like so compelled in such a serious way to make that choice. And you might want to tell people, even just like give some background on what maybe this even the state of monastic academy at that time and like what it is
Mm.
overall. But I'm most curious about yeah, like sort of how you made that choice or commitment or how that became obvious to you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of like, as you say, like I think there is a strong connection between like monasticism and Urbit. And like, it's sort of like, to me, almost like the natural progression for someone who's in the technology world. Is like basically if I look at like the motivation to like work on Urbit in the sense that arises as you like get into it of just like this is the only thing that matters. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like what is that? Like what is that?
Mm-hmm.
This is the only thing that matters. And it's just this sense of like, man, computers are insane. And like they control everything.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're frigging I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, so I won't. And
Uh,
I shouldn't as a monk. As a monk I shouldn't swear, so
this isn't even
but
officially a
computers are
podcast.
insane.
You're not going to
Sure.
offend me. Yeah.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But computers are insane. And as
Yeah.
a technologist, you quickly see that, I guess, and
Yeah.
like either make your peace with it, which people are, some pe better people than I in that
Yeah.
respect, or you're like, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, people go into computer security, people go into all kinds of stuff, but they're just like, there's this basic underlying thing of like, this entire system is so crazy and complicated that like no one can do anything.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't matter. Like I can work on anything, and at the end of the day, I have an app, and like nothing changes.
Yeah. I
And
mean, yeah,
like,
it is. There's almost like an existential part of it, though, I think, where you're like,
yeah,
even for where you're like, if you start down the path of being a conventional engineer, you're like,
yeah,
I'm going to spend my whole life doing this and nothing will be different. Like it will
Exactly.
be the same
Exactly.
forever. Uh,
Exactly.
and I feel like
Yeah.
even as a kid now, it's like I feel like I talk to kids who are kind of they look at it and they're like, I don't know, man. Like that's not, it's not much of a. It doesn't feel quite very good. Like it's not quite
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Anyway,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And as a side note, like one of the things I'm excited about is this sense of just like, I mean, I feel like one of the things that's happened like kind of recently, last like 4 or 5 years, and especially last year in Silicon Valley has been a sort of like, whoa, we put in a bunch of energy on a bunch of assumptions and like what happened? There was this idea, like the dream of Silicon Valley, which is a good dream and is still alive in some ways. And it's not that it's a false dream entirely, but it's like there was this idea, we're going to save the world by making apps. And like
yeah,
here we are, like what, 10 whatever years later, and we're like, all right, wow, golly, everything's on fire.
yeah,
What's going? Let's try and re-examine some of our assumptions here.
yeah,
Um, so that's like kind of exciting to me about where we are right now, like this sort of potentially in some ways bleak landscape, but also
yeah,
like a lot of little sparks of
yeah.
really interesting stuff coming on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we shouldn't follow this rabbit hole too far, but one thing this is
yeah,
comes up
yeah, yeah,
because we've been, Urban's always been like at the fringe of Silicon Valley. We're obviously connected to Silicon Valley in some ways, but we're kind of, yeah, completely, we're like destroy all software and start over. So it's kind of a
yeah,
weird relationship.
yeah.
Um, I feel like, I mean, I grew up near here. I feel like this is just like, I'm here because I just feels normal to be here. Um, and I think that for me, the ethos of Silicon Valley has to do with almost like the ethos of like Los Alamos, early
Mhm,
Intel,
mhm,
like this kind of like really raw, like in like combination of like capital and inventiveness. That basically like you
mhm,
need a lot of capital to get things done because you need a lot of people to work really hard together, and that's actually ultimately just expensive to do. And
mhm,
there's just that's the core of like what makes like I don't it doesn't even matter if it's in Silicon Valley, like it doesn't matter, none of the it doesn't matter whether it's funded by the people who are based here, it doesn't matter, it's just
mhm, mhm,
about like this kind of type of or like way of working that's kind of post-war thing.
Right. This
And so
ethos
I
of
feel like
like we're
people,
gonna, yeah,
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 go
yeah,
ahead,
go.
yeah, it just so
So
I'm
you're
sharing
saying
just
like this ethos of like we're gonna use a lot of capital and some like super talented people to just like do this,
yeah, and we're going to work really hard, like,
and
and
we're
we're
gonna
going to
work really
actually
hard.
make something material,
Yes.
we're going to materialize something basically,
Exactly.
and we
Yeah.
know it's theoretically possible. uh, I think this for me was like is or like became super clear to me when reading the making of the atomic bomb, because it's like everyone's like, okay, we know it's theoretically possible. We're like, it's not about the
Right.
theory. You can't buy theory, right? Like theory is like,
Right.
who knows where that comes from, but once the theory is there, like, well, can you actually get it done? And we like realized a way of basically taking a ton of capital and getting it done.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
sure,
Exactly.
there are other historical examples, but then we were able to repeat that over and over with all these different things. You're kind of like mining this way of
Exactly.
working, and it has overlaps with
Exactly.
engineering and physics, right? Uh,
Exactly.
and then I feel like the weird the thing that the sort of Silicon Valley soul searching thing, I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, was like, do we really think of, there are elements of Uber that are like that, but I'm not really
Yeah.
sure there are elements of like Snapchat that are like that, like
Yeah.
that's kind of a different thing. It's just like I don't know. I don't actually even know what it is, but it seems totally uninteresting to me. I almost feel
Yeah.
like,
Right.
anyway, somehow it's like Silicon Valley got identified with this very small set of things, basically like social tools. And it's like, who
Yeah.
cares about this? I mean, it doesn't even matter. Like the broader
Exactly.
ethos
Yeah.
is
We got.
what's interesting.
Yeah.
And
Exactly. We kind of got like
uh,
sucked into this one direction,
yeah, yeah,
and
it's
then
kind of
like,
like,
but
yeah, it's a local maximum or local, I don't know.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
niche.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
you're trying to talk about something else.
Well, yeah, it's a good point. Basically, just this like for like there's this certain way of doing things, and I think this actually it's going in the right direction that my tendency anyway was to go. So I don't know about right, but it was the direction I was tending in. Is just like there's this general purpose force of like apply a bunch of capital, which is an intersubjective fiction, like we made it up and we're agreeing to use it to
Yeah,
play a game together.
yeah,
Apply a bunch of capital, apply a bunch of human power, organized by belief in like a shared dream
yeah,
that is like, we've theorized and concluded that this is possible,
hmm
and also that we should do it.
hmm
which you have to have like both of those, right? The like
Hmm.
you know, it's theoretically possible, good. Now you
Yeah.
know you can do it, but like, should you?
Yeah.
With the atomic bomb, that's actually a huge question, and somehow we
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
bunch of people to all like just land on yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of weird, actually, right?
Yeah.
Like Einstein is just like, yep,
Yeah.
got to do it. Gonna
Oof.
recommend it.
That might be one of that's like the Silicon Valley like moral crisis is exactly there, right? Like that's one of the
Yes,
most fascinating things about that
yes,
story is
yes,
that
yes,
everyone involved is also extremely unsettled by like what they have,
yes.
wrought upon the world, and it
Exactly,
does move the world in this kind of irreversible and very troubling way. And
exactly,
that might be part of these kinds of things, it's like it's actually
exactly,
yeah, it's that's that conflict is inescapable. That's just part of the deal.
exactly. Yeah. So it's basically just like this thing that happens, right? This like basically human mind understanding what is theoretically possible and what should be done
Yeah.
is a extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Like more humans have shaped the planet more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we keep the this whole exponential growth thing going and move beyond it, maybe the universe.
Yeah.
So extremely powerful, and also if it's wrong even a little bit, that's potentially extremely bad,
Yeah.
right? Like you just sort of forgot about the somehow people, as everyone at Los Alamos, kind of forgot about the part where the Soviet Union would exist and would then make their own bomb, and then we'd have this weird stalemate thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. And also, arguably, although I think they likely did feel this in their hearts and did question this on a daily basis, on some level, maybe found a way to divorce themselves from the felt reality of like hundreds of thousands of people dying of radiation poisoning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, or just weren't aware of it,
Yeah.
didn't actually consider it, and were just like, man, radiation theory is cool.
Well,
Like
it's
nuclear
just
fission theory is
it's
cool to think about.
it's papered over by the belief that this is good, right? Like
Yes, exactly,
it's like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. That's it.
So like seeing this, I mean, I as a technologist started out, and I'm just like, man, I want a computer that isn't insane.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I just keep on tracing it back and back and back and back, right? Like at first, it's just like I want a simple text editor, and then I'm like, nope, I want actually need to replace the whole operating system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nope, actually the hardware. Nope,
Yeah.
actually the state of mind that writes the code.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but even and equally the economic forces that that cooperate with that state of mind to decide what code should be written where and what should be worked on and how.
Yeah.
So it's just like crap. We just have to, basically it's the same ethos as Urbit of just like let's do
Yeah. Yeah.
something right,
Yeah.
and it's just take that. I don't want to say farther back in a sense that makes it sound superior because I think that Urbit,
No, I understand. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
does
interesting.
like uh, it's not that Urbit is less fundamental or something. It's more like
No, they're
I don't
totally
know,
different.
fundamental.
Like,
Yeah, they're totally different. But it's like you're
uh,
trying to do something good and you're starting at some point in the cycle and trying to like basically
well, I think they're
from that point shift
yeah, I mean,
things.
Urbit is a tool. Like, Urbit is a material thing.
Yeah,
It's different. And so Urbit is the conduit. It's not
exactly.
consciousness itself. Um,
Exactly.
and I think that's like one of the things that's, yeah, is compelling. Maybe like one of the almost like design goals of Urbit, right, is to be able to be so um, uh, clearly executed or like cleanly designed that it's um, and that it disappear, right? And to do that,
Yeah,
usually it has to be as reflective. Like things
yeah.
are invisible to us when they reflect us, usually,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Um, so you do have to
Yeah,
have a very clear quality of your thinking in order to work on this project, I think. But
exactly.
also like you're trying to think about, yeah, like how do people want to communicate or form communities or whatever it might be, and like what is the really what is the boundary of sort of meta thinking about that, because it can also
Mhm.
actually become a little bit too meta. Um, But yeah, I ultimately think it's like, yeah, the difference is that Urbit is very material. Like Urbit is just a thing. It has nothing to
Exactly.
do with like
Exactly.
what flows through it.
Exactly.
So
So
no,
then
I
I
think
get
it's
interested
yeah.
in like basically, so like I basically don't look at it in terms of like there's a fundamental part of the feedback loop or something. Like it's just all a big feedback loop.
Yeah.
And so like Urbit is sort of like intervening on one part of this feedback loop.
Yeah.
Monastic training is intervening on a different part of this feedback loop, but it's the same basic work that's being done, which is
Hmm.
clarifying.
Hmm.
It's sort of, if you
Yeah.
want to use the mirror metaphor, it's like polishing the mirror, or like increasing the
Yeah.
resolution of the mirror so that it vanishes, as you say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Anthony and I have been having this ongoing conversation about like, I think of Urbit as also like, well, let's see how to kind of put this. I think that we live in a very materialistic world,
mhm,
and where for the most part people think about generating new things, but for the
mhm.
most part the things that we appreciate the most important things that we have, like things that we have, are things that are empty or void. Like, and so one of the
Ah,
most important acts of design is to just, we're not necessarily destroy
clear
but
out.
to make space,
Yes.
right? And this is like being trained as an architect anyway. Who knows? Jury's out on whether I am an architect, but like uh, that to me is like, that's like such a core like impulse of architecture, right? It's basically, it's about actually it's about the space itself. It's not about the walls. It's not about the
Yeah.
building. It's about making space. You're supposed to think in terms of the void, um,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
so yeah, I think it's like, it's actually really, it's hard to get people to think this way. Really hard actually,
Yeah.
especially when people are engaged in the most of our material production is it's all about how many things. Yeah, it's very additive. It's like, how many more
Yeah.
things can I add in order to
Exactly.
win or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And
But
it's the same thing inside of our minds too. We actually, most of us, a lot of the time, are engaged in this sort of like, how many ideas can I hold? And like, can
yeah,
I fit more ideas in? And
yeah,
we deeply, deeply believe that going in that direction is going to make us more effective.
yeah,
But the sort of age-old lesson of monasticism is basically like, no, sweep it away.
yeah,
You will then have space to hold one idea at a time, which will be the correct idea.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting to think about it on the, yeah. I think architecture, even historically or holistically, however you want to think about it, broadly, is ultimately somewhat materialistic because it's not on that level. I mean, as a characteristic difference, right? It's like architecture is
Yes,
about
yes,
creating space. I mean, maybe it can be digital space, maybe it can be space on the page, whatever, but there's
yes.
still, it's something realized, like it's a realized void,
Mm,
versus, I think, yeah, in from the monastic standpoint, it is totally internal space
mhm,
that you're working on,
mhm.
which might be okay. So wait, so that's one of the things that I find the most interesting about the actual work that you do from day to day, because it's a very difficult to measure or organize in the sense, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, okay, sure. So we want to clear out as many minds as possible or something, right? But like, how do you
Yes.
think about that, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
concretely, right?
Yeah.
I think, Urbit has, like, we can write KPIs, we can write, what I mean,
Yes.
like things that
Yes.
even if it
Yes.
has to do with simplifying code or trusting someone to be able to simplify it, uh, can you, yeah, maybe I'm curious about the mechanics of how that works in terms of just like even the more mundane parts of monastic academy.
Totally. So part of it is just that like so our state of mind actually gets reflected in everything that we do. And in a way that's pretty easy to observe. So like if someone's room is messy,
Mm-hmm.
that correlates pretty strongly with whether they're like in some sort of thing. They've got something going on. Uh, Even down to like the way that someone hits the bell. So we have bells in our sitting periods, and the way that someone hits the bell is actually going to sound different depending on like how concentrated they are, where their attention is, what their attentional pattern is. So in a way, they're communicating their attentional pattern through the bell. And so in a way, it's almost the most observable thing because
Mm-hmm.
it's behind every action that you take and every way that you manifest.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's, as you say, the least, in another way, the least observable thing. It's your mind. Where is it? How could you find it?
Well, maybe it requires, but it's hard. It's not everyone can observe those differences. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah. So getting to the point where you can notice, okay,
Yeah,
this person's place is messy. Okay, that bell was, they hit that kind of sideways or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
I would maybe not try to explain this stuff here, but like,
I understand.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, you basically. So this then is the other element of it is that like you kind of need professionals. You don't need everyone to be a professional, I don't think.
yeah,
That's not a goal of mine anyway. But
yeah,
you do need professionals who have gotten to the point of being able to detect that in a
yeah,
reliable way that at the very least, agrees with other professionals.
yeah,
It's not good enough, but that's sort of like the bare minimum. If people are just like,
yeah,
if I'm like, you were in your head as you hit that bell, and the other teacher here, Pan, is like, what are you talking about? No, they
yeah,
weren't. That's a
yeah,
real bad sign, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
uh-oh,
yeah.
maybe we're making this up.
It's a
Um,
tradition.
yeah. If everyone agrees, if everyone evaluates the same way, you could still be making it up. You still have a group mind phenomenon happening.
Hmm.
But like, it's at least a data point.
Hmm.
Um, and then, as you say, there is this like tradition element. There's this kind of like anchoring in a lineage that goes back a long time, and
Oh, I meant like the standards are held in trust in a tradition, like the way that those standards are even communicated. Sure, functionally,
right.
like is there's a process of carrying that on, but the only way that you and Pan even get on the same page to begin with is that you attempt to hold the same set of things, or you
Yeah,
come to the same level of assessment or something like that,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then that assessment, it's interesting. It's like that comes through the work of clearing away obstructions.
Yeah,
So it's like this is maybe, I don't know, a note to end on or something, but like the thing that's so interesting me about the path of monasticism is how like we have this sort of understanding, like the way we think about religion is it's a sort of like people tell you what to do and then you do it. Like people tell you what to
yeah,
believe and then you believe it.
yeah,
I could be duping myself here, but that hasn't been my experience of the path of monasticism. It's been much more like do this pretty mechanical process, and then like after you've done that for like a week or a month, like read this text and see if it seems to be describing your experience.
yeah,
And then you're like, oh, yep. It's not read this text and then try to make your experience into it. Is
yeah,
the opposite of that.
yeah,
Like deconstruct your experience and then what happens.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it seems like a huge part of it is keeping the tradition of practice, basically, in terms of like
yep.
setting up guidelines around which you are going to have whatever experience it is that you might have, but you need these kind of rhythmic guideposts, whatever they might be, whether it's
Big
sitting or
time.
whether it's work of a certain kind or whatever it might be. Um,
Big time.
but yeah, I don't want to. You're gonna. Oh yeah, you're out
Yeah.
of time. We're
So
out of
on
time.
that
It's
note of
fine.
guideposts,
That's fine. Just yeah, do the work. That's like we could do this again. There's a lot.
yeah.
There's like too much possible territory to cover.
Let's do it again. I'd love to come on again. This has been
Yeah,
really
sure.
good.
Yeah. You make it seem like this is like a real show or something. It's really, makes it seem legitimate. It was really just an experiment that's kind of like ongoing and hopefully is a good set of like archival material. But anyway, it's nice to chat with you and like, yeah, let's do it
Yeah.
again. We can
Yeah.
totally do it again, happily.
Yeah,
Um,
always really nice to chat.
yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, talk soon. Take good
All right.
care. Be well.
Yeah. Too. See you.